Hi everybody, this is Nick on Control Nick, and today I'm going to teach you a cool growth function in Excel called the RRI function. It's a function that allows you to show the average growth over time over a set period. So let's dive into the Excel workbook so I can show you a quick example of how you use it. Okay, so we're in the Excel workbook and we have a super simple table that I'm going to use to show you RRI. And actually, RRI, it stands for rate of return on investment. It's a very common function that people use in the corporate life to understand what is the average growth rate over time. So, firstly, in this table, what you have as example data is the years from 2010 through 2023. And then you have the iPhone users in millions from those years, from 2010 to 2023. And I'm going to show you exactly the difference between the average growth rate you can use versus just normal growth rate. So in column D, I'm going to show you normal growth rate. And typically normal growth rate is just comparing one year to another year. So for example, between 2010 and 2011, the iPhone users have grown from 60 million to 115 million. If you were to calculate annual growth rate, you would do equals sign and you would do the 2011 number divided by the 2010 number. And then when you get that, it shows 91% growth. And to get the exact growth number, you'd put in -1 into the formula. You have 91.7% growth. And in theory, what I could do is if I want to see the average growth each year versus the prior year it's comparing to, you can just drag the formula down and you can see how the years are comparing amongst themselves. You can see in the start, iPhone users grew very significantly, but actually over the years, it actually has grown not as much as it once did. So interesting to look at this. But what could also be super useful in annual growth is if I were to actually delete all of this, you can also compare versus different years, right? So you can do 2023 versus 2021. And that can also show you a different comparison. But again, it's only comparing one year to the other. And actually, that's the really cool part about RRI, because now what would be interesting to see is, although you had all those different numbers, which I will put up for you right now again, just a moment. So now that we have all those numbers again, it is interesting to see this year over year comparison, but what would be really cool is to see now on average, how much has iPhone users grown from 2010 to 2023? From an analytical standpoint, you could say, wow, it's significant growth in the beginning, and it's really kind of halted its growth over time. But how does that look on an average? And you can't just drag over all of these cells and then look at the average or use an average formula because it's not showing the weighted average. Because, of course, as you grow over time, the number that you're comparing to is becoming larger and larger. So it'll skew and weight towards those averages later on in the years. But let's use RRI. So what you do to start off is you just do equal sign RRI, and you can see Excel will pop it up for you with an explanation of what the function does. So Excel says it returns an equivalent interest rate for the growth of an investment. Now, it doesn't have to be interest rate, it's just the average growth over time that we're using here. We'll put in a parentheses to start the formula. So the first thing you need is the net period of time. In theory, if you're looking at years, it's very simple. For example, for this first formula, it's 2010 versus 2011. That just means it's 1 year. If it's 2010 versus 2023, it would be those two numbers minus themselves, or you could do the count -1, and I'll show you that formula in a second. But just to start off, we'll do 2010 versus 2011. We'll use 1 as the period there, and then you need the present value. So that is the value at the start, which is 60 in this formula, and then you need the future value, or where we are today, which is the 115. Now we're finished. We can close the parentheses and click enter. And you'll notice that it's actually the exact same percentage as a typical comparison because you're just comparing 1 year. There's no need to average anything out. Let's do it again though for 2 years. So from 2010 to 2012. So I'm going to do the same thing. So equals RRI parenthesis. We'll do over these 2 years. Present value is the 60 still. And the future value though now is 206. Close parenthesis, enter. You'll notice that the 91.7 to the 79.1 for annual growth is now a little bit different from this RRI function because now we have the average growth that's accumulated over these 2 years. Let's make it a little bit smarter because it actually makes it a little bit easier to add in this functionality using a count formula so that you can just drag it down and you don't need to repeat the formula every time, especially if you're interested in 2010 through 2023, or if you want to make tweaks so that it's a quick adjustment. For example, let's do equals RRI, parenthesis. Now, what is the net period amount? So what I would do is count. So you want to count the amount of cells that you're counting over to the left from your starting point. So right now we're starting from 2010 and we're going to 2013. I'm going to do F4 because when you do F4, it locks your cells as you're dragging. And then what you actually want to do is in the cell that you want to move up and down in rows, you're going to adjust that locking so that it's not by columns, but you can drag it by rows. So I'm only adjusting that locking there. And then I'm going to close the count. In theory, it's going to count 4 from 2010 to 2013, but in reality, the net period is actually 3. So what we'll do is we'll just do -1. So it's the count of those cells minus 1. Comma, then we're going to do the present value. So the present value is 60. And we're going to do a lock on that cell so it doesn't move as we drag down. Comma, future value is going to be 329. We're not going to lock anything there because as we drag down, it's going to drag down that future value as well. Then we'll do closing parentheses and enter. Now you can actually see that this percent is going down further and further from 2011 to 2013 because on average, the users have been going down over the last few years. Let's see what happens if I drag this formula all the way down. Now that we have it dragged down, I'm going to click into the formula bar to show you what we're looking at. As you can see, because we locked B3 into place in this array, but we only locked in the column, we didn't lock in the row, it kept dragging down the cell for us while maintaining 2010. We also have C3 locked in, so the present value is continuously going to be 60, but then we didn't lock in the future value, so that's been dragged down to 1380. But what's interesting to see is that from 2010 to 2023, although it looks like the iPhone user growth is dropping, there's still ebbs and flows as you can see over the years, but on average, over a 13-year period, iPhone users have grown 27%. It's a really cool way to show average growth over time, and it's super versatile. You can use it not just for your growth in users over time like what you're using here. You can use it for revenue and costs, customer counts, things of that nature, anything that you want to carry over through a period of time to see what's the average growth. And what I don't want to stop you from thinking about is just comparing to the same present value of 2010. But what you could also do is if I click into the formula, you can adjust the array so that maybe you don't want to compare from 2010 to 2023. Maybe, for example, you know that, well, COVID hit so much in 2020 that you want to ignore that piece of time. You want to start in 2021. You can drag that array down to using 21 to 23, and then also drag the present value down to the reference value next to 2021. So if I were to do enter, you can actually see that from 2021 to 2023, iPhone users have only grown 3.4%. It's a really interesting way just to see the development over time and also when comparing versus different periods. So you can compare also, for example, 2016 to 2019 as well. That way you're skipping over 2020 knowing it's a COVID heavy period and then comparing and contrasting those periods in time before and after COVID also. Feel free to play around this function. It's highly recommended. We use it often, at least I do in my corporate day-to-day. That was actually it for today's video. If you found it useful, please consider subscribing because it always helps out the channel, and feel free to select either of the videos popping up on your screen here, which I find relevant. Thanks again and have an amazing rest of your day.